Hi, welcome back to Joe Blogs. In today's episode, I want to talk about the Russian population and specifically the Russian workforce. One of the major negative implications of Russia's invasion of Ukraine was that it led to a mass exodus of people and workforce. Many of the people living in Russia simply didn't agree with the politics, so they decided that they wanted to leave the country. A lot of people were working for international companies who decided that they no longer wanted to have any dealings with Russia, so those companies left and took their employees with them. As a result of the announcement of the mobilization, a lot of younger people were concerned that they were going to be called up and forced to go to Ukraine and fight, so they decided to leave the country. And the multiple sanctions that were raised against Russia reduced the amount of trade that it was able to do with attractive countries from the West, and this led many Russians to make the decision that their futures lay outside of Russia. And the net impact of this mass emigration on the Russian economy is highly negative. Firstly, they've seen an overall reduction in the workforce, but secondly, and most importantly, they have seen a massive brain drain. Russia has lost some of its most valuable workforce, those people who are highly educated and highly skilled. And at a time when Russia is facing a record number of sanctions, and therefore has lost the ability to source things like technology, Russia desperately needs to retain its best people. So in today's video, I'll have a look at what's happening with the Russian workforce. We'll then go on to talk about the brain drain specifically and how many skilled young people left Russia in 2022. And once again, heads up, spoiler alert, it is a big number. We'll then go on to have a look at the population pyramid and identify why this is such a severe problem for Russia right now, because Russia has been experiencing demographic problems anyway over the last 20 years. So this brain drain is only going to accentuate the problems that were already coming for Russia. We'll have a look at what's been happening with the fertility rate and the death rate in Russia, because they are very unusual. And then finally today I'll wrap up with my summary as to what I think the implications of the loss of the workforce and the brain drain are going to be on the Russian economy over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. A recent report published by Russia's Yegor-Gaidar Institute for Economic Policy, which surveys managers of around 1,000 industrial enterprises in the country each month, found that 35% of all Russian businesses are facing labour shortages, and this represents a significant deterioration since the start of 2022. In January 2022, which was 1 month before the invasion of Ukraine started, 26% of Russian businesses had reported a shortage of employees. In October 2022, so around 7 months after the start of the war, and importantly after President Putin made his mobilization speech, where he announced that 300,000 additional men would be called up on a compulsory basis in Russia, the total staff shortages were reported as 33%. In January 2023, rather surprisingly, the survey reported that staff shortages were down to 27%. However, in April 2023, staff shortages were reported by 35% of companies, which is the highest level seen in Russia since 1996. Now, if you've been following the channel, you'll know that since the start of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, there have been a variety of factors that have encouraged people to leave Russia. At the very start of the war, it was reported that around 500,000 people left Russia in the first month because they simply didn't agree with the politics and no longer wanted to live in Russia. And then over the course of the following 6 months, it was reported that an additional 700,000 people had left Russia. And there was an acceleration in the exodus in the summer of 2022 after the mobilization of additional troops was announced. And of course, the reason that this is really important in terms of the Russian economy is that if you don't have enough people, that means that your companies can't operate at their maximum capacity, they can't increase their production, and therefore that means that their results will fall, they will earn less revenue, they will produce less things, they will make less profit. They will therefore pay less tax, and their employees on the whole will earn less money, and therefore less money will circulate into the economy. And so this has a negative multiplier effect through the whole of the Russian economy. And at a time when the Russian economy is recording record deficits, this is the last thing that Russia needs. It needs to have all of its people in full employment. But the overall number of people in employment isn't the biggest factor that's going to hurt Russia. The biggest problem that they're facing is the brain drain. Now, before we go on any further today, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Exter. Exter makes the world's coolest wallets. They're super slim, around half the size of conventional wallets, but still allow you to carry up to 12 cards and cash. All Exeter wallets have built-in RFID blocking, which protects you from data theft and wireless skimming. And Exeter have also developed a super slim tracking device, which is solar powered and allows you to track your wallet's location from your phone. But the coolest thing about Exeter wallets is that they provide you with quick card access, allowing you to access your cards at the click of a button using Exeter's signature trigger mechanism. Exeter wallets come in a variety of designs and colours, and the great news is that Joe Blogs viewers can get a discount of up to 25% by using the code JoeBlogs at checkout. So if you're looking for an uber cool gift for someone you know, or maybe you just fancy treating yourself, please click in the link below. So what is the definition of brain drain? Well, a brain drain is a substantial emigration or migration of individuals, which can be the result of either turmoil within a nation, the existence of favourable professional opportunities in other countries, or a desire to seek a higher standard of living. Brain drain can cause countries to lose a core portion of valuable individuals, and some of the consequences include the loss of tax revenue. The main causes of a brain drain can be classified as either pull factors or push factors. Pull factors are attractive features of other countries, such as higher wages, better accommodation and higher standards of living, whereas push factors are negative factors within your own country, such as political strife and instability, war and persecution based on religion, gender or sexuality. A brain drain can have major consequences on a country and its economy. Areas affected by brain drains end up with a dearth of human capital. Professionals who go elsewhere end up leaving a large hole, one that potentially isn't always easy to fill. A good example of this is medical professions in developing nations, who move to parts of the developed world for better opportunities, and there simply may not be enough qualified people to replace them when they leave, which affects the quality of healthcare for those left behind. Another major implication of the brain drain is a loss of revenue. Governments rely on income taxes to fund their social programs and infrastructure projects, and a mass exodus leads to a drop in tax receipts, which can stunt economic growth and development. It's been reported that in 2022 alone, 1.3 million Russians aged between 20 and 35 permanently left Russia. And as a result of this, the total number of young workers at the end of 2022 amounted to 21.5 million people, which is less than 30% of all employees and is the lowest level that Russia has seen since records started. And this age group is really critical to the workforce because these are young professionals who've already gained work experience, but at the same time have high labour mobility and therefore are really useful to the Russian economy. The second highest age group affected was between 30 and 34 years of age, where there was a decrease of 524,000 people. And once again, this is a critical group because you've got people who've been in the workforce for between 10 and 15 years, who are highly experienced young specialists and are basically the management of the future. So the loss of these highly skilled, highly educated workers is bad news in itself. But the result of companies losing these individuals is that there is now a wage race going on in Russia. As companies lose their valuable people, they need to recruit replacements. So wages have been rising in all of these key age groups. So if you're an individual who's decided to stay, now is a great time to be an employee in Russia because you're getting paid record levels. But the problem from an economic point of view for Russia is that they've got a contracting workforce and an increasing cost base. And when you combine that with the absolute shortage of workers that we've just talked about, that is a deadly combination from a profits point of view because you're paying a smaller number of people more money, the output overall for your company is going down, and therefore you will make less profit. So the brain drain is now starting to have a really negative impact on the Russian economy. However, the problem doesn't stop there for Russia because there is a demographic problem that has been building up for the last 25 to 30 years in Russia. The population profile of a country is really important. A healthy economy will show lots of people at different stages of their life, with a large chunk of the population being of a working age so that they can contribute to the growth of the economy. Now, generally speaking, a developed country will tend to have a lower death rate than the average because it has a better health system, it has a better standard of living, people tend to be eating better, living better, and therefore they don't die as early, and they will generally have a lower birth rate than the world average. This chart shows the overall population pyramid for the world as of 2022. So you can see that the total population is just under 8 billion, and we've got a spread here of all different age groups. So you can see that the biggest single age group at the moment is the 0 to 4 category. And as we move up the pyramid, you can see there is a slight reduction in the number of people in each age category up until 30 to 34, where we see a slight increase, and then a gradual reduction again all the way through to the final category of 100 plus. So this represents the aggregate for the whole of the world. But as I just mentioned, if we were looking at a developing country, we would see more of a triangular pattern because the birth rate would be higher and there would be a higher percentage of individuals at the bottom of the chart in the younger categories, and the death rate would generally also be higher in a developing country, and therefore there would be less people at the top end of this chart. So it'd be more of a triangle. Now if we were looking at a developed country, then it would be more of a rectangle because the birth rates and the death rates are lower. So people are generally having less children and they're living longer. So we would see more people at the top end of the chart and slightly less people at the bottom end of the chart. And this is the population pyramid for Russia. Now, Russia is officially a developed economy, so you would have expected this to have a nice rectangular shape. However, it doesn't, and there are a number of major concerns thrown up by the shape of this pyramid. In a balanced economy, we would be expecting each of these 5-year age brackets to represent around 6 or 6.5% of the population. If you look at the age groups between 15 and 30 in Russia, they are significantly less than what you would expect. The 15 to 19 bracket represents 5.1%, 20 to 24 represents 4.5%, and 25 to 29 represents 5.3%. And this represents a significant shortfall in the young workforce in Russia. So these are the people who are either in junior employment or will be entering employment at some point over the next 5 years. And they will really become the mainstay of the economy over the next 10 to 15 years. They become more productive, they have families, they expand, and they spend money. So you really need a solid group to be coming through to be able to support the rest of this pyramid. But if you look at the overall shape of this pyramid, it's entirely unbalanced. And the other point to note about this chart is the split between male and female. There are significantly less males than females in every age category from 35 onwards. So if we have a look at the actual numbers rather than the percentages, from 40 to 45, there are 5.3 million men and 5.7 million women. 45 to 49, 4.8 million men, 5.2 million women. 50 to 54, 4 million men and 4.6 million women. 55 to 59, 4.2 million men and 5.2 million women. 60 to 64, 4.3 million men and 5.8 million women. 65 to 69, 3.4 million men and 5.4 million women. And 70 to 74, 2.2 million men and 4 million women. Now, these statistics raise a couple of concerns. Firstly, what has been going on with regards to the male population in Russia? Why is it significantly smaller than the female population? And number two, what is the potential economic impact of this for Russia? Because a lot of the workforce is male dominated in Russia. So back in 1950, the population of Russia was around 103 million. Up until 1995, it grew steadily to around 148 million. And since that point, we have seen a fall and then a slight rise, and it's expected that the population of Russia will reduce to around 126 million by the end of this century. This chart shows the fertility rate in Russia since 1950, and the fertility rate is a simple measure that just records how many children each female in the country has. So if the fertility rate is above 2, then generally speaking they have an increasing population because the two parents are producing more than 2 people, and if the fertility rate is less than 2, then you'll generally speaking have a declining population because the 2 people are producing less than 2. So let's focus in on the period between 1998 and 2018. So you can see that in 1998, the fertility rate in Russia was 2.12%. So that would indicate that the population was growing. But as we move forward, you can see that there was a dramatic fall in the fertility rate and hit a low in 1998 of 1.26. And that fertility rate is one of the lowest in the world. From 1998 onwards, there was an improvement. And by 2008, the rate had got up to 1.8. So still less than 2, so still indicates a declining population, but certainly better than 1.26. And as a comparison, this chart shows the fertility rate in the USA over the same period. So in 1998, the fertility rate was just under 2. By 2008, it had risen above 2. and today it's sitting at around 1.8. So what happened to the birth rate in Russia between 1988 and 1998? Why did we see such a dramatic fall? Well, this was the period after the breakup of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was disbanded in 1991, and Russia then embarked upon a period of privatization whereby they were looking to work with overseas companies to develop the economy. And in the early part of the 1990s, it worked well. There was prosperity, and people enjoyed the new freedom that capitalism gave them. However, at the end of the 1990s, we saw a dramatic fall in the price of oil. It fell to around $10 per barrel. And this decimated the Russian economy. And if you follow the channel, you'll be aware that Russia actually defaulted on its internal debt at that time. And it entered a period of recession. And this threw the whole world upside down in Russia. And there's no official reason as to why the birth rate fell. But it's been recorded by a lot of commentators that they believe that the economic uncertainty and the fact that everybody was now operating in a capitalist environment rather than communist led the people of Russia to be more cautious, to be more nervous, to be a lot more downbeat about the future. There was a lot more drinking, alcoholism and depression, and that led to a dramatic fall in the birth rate. So we saw this as a natural consequence of the recession that kicked in Russia, causing people in Russia to stop having children. And it became so serious that President Putin actually introduced a range of measures, a package incentivizing people to have more children. And that included a payment of $9,000 to any woman who had a second child. So this was literally paying people to get the birth rate back up again. And that policy obviously proved to be a success over the long term because the birth rate has come back. But what we've got is a pronounced 20-year dip in birth rate in Russia, which is now starting to impact on the economy. This chart plots the death rate in Russia and shows the number of deaths per 1,000 people. So if we look at what happened over the same 20-year period, in 1988, the death rate was 11 per 1,000 people. Now that is actually quite a high rate compared to a lot of other developed countries. But between 1998 and 2003, there was a sharp increase in the death rate, and it peaked at over 16 deaths per 1,000 by 2003. Now, over the next 5 years, there was a reduction, and the rate came down to 12.7. However, it subsequently increased, and it's now sitting at just below 13. Now, as a comparison, let's have a look at the USA. In 1988, the death rate was just below 9 per 1,000. By 2008, the rate had fallen to 8 per 1,000, and it's now risen back up to 9. So the figures that we're looking at for Russia are significantly higher. 11 at the start of the period, a peak of 16, and back down to around 13 at the end of this period. So the big question is, what's been going on in Russia to cause such a high death rate? Well, again, there's no official reason for this, but the main issue that's been recorded by commentators is unhealthy living, alcoholism and depression, which led to high mortality rates, particularly amongst men. So this explains why the number of men in each age category of the population pyramid was significantly less than women. So what's the summary and conclusion today? Well, I wanted to post this video really to give you an update as to what the implications of the war in Ukraine are on the Russian economy. We've talked a lot about defense spending and the impact of the sanctions reducing Russia's income and increasing its costs. But what we're talking about today are specific factors that have been caused by the war that are now starting to hurt industry within Russia. So these aren't external pressures that are being applied by the USA and the West. These are things that are self-inflicted. As a result of Russia's decision to invade Ukraine, a lot of individuals decided that they didn't agree with those politics and that they wanted to leave the country. In addition to that, a lot of companies from the West decided that they wanted to shut up shop and leave Russia for good. Now, if you're a highly skilled and educated person in any country in the world, you want to work with the biggest companies, the multinational companies who are at the cutting edge of your business. And the fact that a lot of these multinational companies decided to exit from Russia really accelerated the thought process for a lot of people, and they decided that they wanted to go with those companies. They didn't want to stay in Russia. They would rather go with the companies and stay right at the forefront of those industries. And in addition to those people, a lot of individuals simply decided that their futures lay elsewhere. They didn't want to stay in an economy that was seeing a reduction in terms of its markets, a reduction in terms of technology available to it. They wanted to go into the big wide world and continue their careers. And as we saw at the start of the video, over 1.3 million young people left Russia in 2022. And that exodus is still continuing. There are still young, skilled people leaving Russia on a daily basis. And this is really going to hurt the Russian economy because over the course of the last 18 months, Russia has lost access to a variety of technology that it was previously sourcing from the West. And in order to try to avoid losing ground against the rest of the world, Russia now needs to develop its own capabilities, develop its own technology. And the only way that it will be able to do that is by retaining its best people, its highly educated workforce, its skilled workforce. So the fact that all of those people are walking out of the door is a double whammy from Russia's point of view. They're already on their knees in terms of the loss of trade, the reduction in income from oil and gas sales, and the massive increase in costs that have been seen as a result of the war effort in Ukraine. So to lose some of their best people at the same time is devastating. And the impact of the problems that this will cause for Russia won't just last for 3 or 6 months. This is a long-term issue. And as we saw from the population pyramids and the demographics, Russia already had a problem because of the massive reduction in the fertility rate and the increase in the death rates. The pyramid had really narrowed for all of that key workforce, those people in their 20s and 30s who are the future of Russia. So Russia already had an imbalanced population pyramid. It's got too many older people and not enough younger people. And the brain drain that's been caused by Russia's invasion of Ukraine has accentuated that problem. So at some point, Russia is going to hit the wall. It's going to get to the situation where it's just got too many people to support at the older age bracket. The social cost of that is going to be massive. And if Russia simply doesn't have enough workforce to be able to generate the taxes to pay for that, it will become bankrupt. So the overall summary of today's video is that Russia already had problems with its demographics. It was already facing a population crisis. However, since the invasion of Ukraine, that crisis has been accelerating and it is now getting to the critical stage where Russia could reach the point of no return. This might be impossible for Russia to reverse, and therefore at some point over the course of the next 3 to 10 years, Russia is going to see a massive reduction in its income at the same time as its costs are increasing rapidly. So hopefully you found today's episode useful, informative and thought-provoking. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching this video all the way through to the end, and here's something to put a smile on your face.